ultimately, sales is about giving people enough reason to choose you, but also to not choose all of the other alternatives. So it's not enough to simply get them excited about you. You need to empower them and connect with them in a way that makes them want to do business with you rather than all of the other companies that they could buy from. And so if you're not giving them enough reason for that, then you're not going to be able to go the distance and really build a brand that has a strong, credible future.
Welcome to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen and I am your host. And today we've got a very special guest, Emma Schermer Tamir, who helps businesses in high competition environments transform into unbeatable brands. Since 2016, she's led the team at Marketing by Emma to help over 2,000 businesses boost their sales and build their brands online. And as a thought leader and trusted consultant, Emma empowers leaders to think deeper to dominate the competition. Welcome to the podcast, Emma.
Thank you. That's actually the first time I've heard that. It's a new bio. It's the first time I've heard it. And I'm like, I like that.
Yeah, it's nice. Definitely concise. It covers, what you've been doing and what you've got going on. So, good stuff. Definitely have a great client base under your belt. And so I know things are going well. And, today, really excited to talk to you. We're going to be talking about a few different things here: strategic positioning, customer research, brand identity building, and then even Amazon product page optimization. So those are some things that you specialize in with the customers that you're working with. So really excited to unpack some of those things. But before we do get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and specifically how you got into what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm really excited to be here and talk with you. I fell into the world of marketing very early on in my professional development. I grew up as a skilled writer, and as I started taking jobs, even waitressing at restaurants and working in natural food store and places like that, my bosses kept recognizing, oh, she can write. Do you want to help us with our newsletter? Do you want to maybe start a blog for us? And so I started saying yes to these projects. And then I realized I needed to learn. It's not just about being a good writer. There's a lot of other elements at play to determine whether projects like that are going to be successful. And so the more I started educating myself about it, the more interested I became. And fast forward to my second date with my husband, and he said, I don't know, what the future for us holds, but I can see you're miserable at your job. At this point, I was doing marketing for a software startup. And he said, I have a big network and I would love to be able to introduce you. I think I could get you some great gigs if you wanted to go out on your own. And I was like, no, that's so embarrassing. Please don't do that. And then we eventually got married, and he, I guess, decided he didn't need my permission anymore. So I was away on a business trip, and I came home and I learned not to leave my husband by himself for 5 days because he just might start a business.
Oh, that's funny. So when you got back, there was a business going.
There was a business, and he said, okay, there's all these people that want to talk to you about working with you. And at this point, I'd had some freelance clients, but I really wasn't actively pursuing going off on my own. And very quickly into agreeing to at least humor him, we recognized that there was a lot of demand, that there was a big need. At the time, there were really not a lot of copywriting services specializing in the Amazon ecosystem. And there's a
Right.
lot of nuance to what it takes to be successful on that marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found ourselves at this turning point of, do we just stay very small and hand select the clients that we want to work with? Or do we try and grow an agency and figure out how to hire people and develop systems? And we opted for the agency route, and so we've been doing that since the end of 2016, which I can't believe that we're approaching 8 years in business.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations to you guys to reaching that milestone, the 8 years. You're fastly approaching 10 years, which is definitely an accomplishment.
Thank
As a
you.
no problem, and as a business owner myself that has had a long running business, I know what it takes to kind of get past those milestones. It's not easy, and
No, no.
so I know you guys have been putting in the work. So that is great to hear. So one of the things I would like to kind of get into, I kind of want to dive right into something that I know a lot of the listeners and viewers are wondering about, is either if they have a particular brand or they're thinking about starting a brand. And I always love to learn from lessons from existing companies, because I think that's kind of the best way to learn from, learning from the trenches, so to speak. So I wanted to see if you could share a story of a brand that successfully transformed its identity and positioned themselves strategically and specifically in a high competition environment. And it
Yeah,
doesn't
so
have to be one that you've worked with, but it's just one that you can cite.
so this was the question that I really had to pause at when I was preparing for this conversation today, because I'm like, I talk a lot about brands that do a great job of launching with a clear identity, but
Yes.
finding those brands that successfully transition, they're not as common to come by. I think because especially as you get large and more entrenched in your ways, it's harder to either convince enough people that it's worth taking this risk and pivoting to a new phase, or you just are, it's a scary thing to do, to say we're going to really kind of abandon this identity that we have built up for such a long time and commit to something new that's untested. And so what jumped into my mind, and it might be because I have one sitting to the left of me here, is the brand Stanley. And I think that so Stanley, if you're not familiar, it's essentially
Mhm.
it's a thermos, or a Yeti would
Yes.
be two of their top competitors. So
I'm familiar with them.
insulated drinkware. None of
Hmm.
it's particularly revolutionary when it comes to the technology. They all keep your beverages either hot or cold for a long time. And so the brand is actually a very important piece and a very significant point of differentiation. Stanley, I just actually looked it up before this recording. They started in 1913. So they've been
Wow.
around for over 100 years. And up until just the last few years, they were really seen as more of a working man's kind of no nonsense brand. And a few years ago, all of a sudden, they just started going viral on social media.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they did very well is they were listening to what was happening online. And when they saw the opportunity, they ran with it. And so people started talking about their um, mugs and whatnot on
Mhm.
TikTok. And a lot of them were women who had children and they were in specific types of communities, and they loved the handles and they loved the portability and they loved how large they were and this, that, and the other. And so they really started to build this fandom around this brand. And rather than just treat them as, okay, it's great you're there, we're glad you're buying our products, they really embraced these women and started partnering with them and listened to what they wanted and started creating limited edition colors and patterns and designs, specifically with different influencers. And so I think it's really amazing to see how a brand that so easily could have stayed just very comfortably entrenched in their ways, which would have, they've been doing the same thing for a long time,
Right.
were able to be nimble and open-minded enough to recognize the opportunity and to really capitalize on that and run with it in a way that I mean, the Stanley mug that I have here is, I don't know if you can really tell with the lighting, but it's light pink.
Okay.
This is
Gotcha.
never a color that would have been in their catalog
Right.
20 years ago. It would
Right.
have
Not at all.
been on the clearance shelf, even if somebody had taken a chance of doing that. And so I think one of the big lessons there is recognizing that who you think your customer is, or maybe who your customer was at one point, is not actually who your customer is or could be today or moving into the future. And that's why it's so important to not treat things like your customer research and understanding your competitive landscape and who you are as a brand. You really need to be keeping a solid focus on all of those things and making sure that you are keeping an evolved understanding of all of those, because otherwise it's very easy to have a customer avatar that's 10 years old, that's not really relevant to your current customer base. And if you're working from a profile of a customer who's not really interested in your product anymore, or who has different interests, maybe that is the same customer, but now they're 10 years older, they have a different set of concerns and considerations that they are mulling over when making a decision, you need to be mindful of that.
Yes, very, very true. Thank you for sharing that. That really is an inspiring transformation, because it's just so fascinating to see how a brand like Stanley made those strategic changes and how significant of an impact that was to them. Because like you said, they started in 1913, and I'm sure back then they were making these drinkware, maybe thermoses and things for men going to a construction site or something like that, and men out doing things on the farm, stuff like that. And so now, like you said, you held up the mug that you have that's pink. They would have, that's a total, almost a total 180 from the target market that they had in the past. But so it's just good to know that you know it's never too late to make that change, to make that transition and adjust with the times. And it seems like it's definitely paid off for them, that transition that they made.
Absolutely. In some ways, they've reinvigorated that whole product category also. I think their
Nice.
competitors have benefited from this Stanley craze that took over social media. I think it's quieted down a little bit, but and it can also go both ways. We also see companies that don't figure these things out, or that
Yes.
maybe once they get acquired and they're now suddenly having to offer answer to shareholders, they lose some of those things that made them special or really allow them to be able to connect with customers in a more meaningful way.
Yes, it's true. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it kind of brings me to my next question, the next area I wanted to kind of get into. How does strategic positioning, because like you said, with Stanley, they've almost kind of switched their strategic position to cover, you know, a whole different area of, you know, women that are active, women that are, you know, going to the gym, things like that. How does that differ for a startup brand as opposed to, you know, an established brand like them that's in a competitive market? Because it's, I think, two different ways that they have to address this.
Totally. So that's an excellent question. And I think you always want to start with having a lot of clarity, precision, and narrow focus on who you are serving when you are starting out. And one of the biggest headwind, well, that I'm just not going to use that analogy. Headwinds, I don't recall if it's blowing in your face or against you. So let's abandon that metaphor. One of the biggest ways that you can build momentum as a new brand and really win over market share, because let's just take a step back for a moment. When you are entering a category, it's very rare that you are in the position of bringing a completely new innovation or product that's never existed before. So you're coming into a category and you already have competition. And it's not that you already have competition, but everybody that's been a customer has already been shopping from your competition. So as you are entering the marketplace as the new kid, you need to figure out how you can give customers a reason to abandon the company they are already shopping from and choose you instead.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the primary tools that you have at your disposal to do that is your brand identity and how you are positioning yourself. And if you are wanting to win over those new customers, then you have to give them a very compelling reason to choose you. And so if you can do a better job at making a certain group of people feel seen and understood and excited about what you're doing as a business, then you're going to be able to be successful in achieving that. And so that is going to require a lot more bold choices and speaking to a very defined target market. Now, what happens is as you start to become more established, as you start to be seen as the market leader, as you've been around for a long time, you're a larger company, maybe you're, if we're talking about physical goods, then you're in a lot of different places. If somebody's wanting to buy you, you have that brand recognition. What's naturally going to happen is, yes, you have still your target customer base, but that's going to get wider because perhaps there's some people that see that target customer base as aspirational. So even though they don't necessarily fit into that group, they still aspire to being seen as somebody in that group, or they're looking for something that's just a good product that's functional. And so figuring out how to straddle the need, sorry, that was my keyboard batteries telling me that they've been recharged.
Not a problem.
Straddling that need of still wanting to speak directly to your core customer base, but also needing to speak to people that may not either have as much knowledge around that thing or as much experience, or not see themselves as closely with that target customer base. And so I still think it's important to keep a very honed in identity and voice, but I think that's where we start to see a greater dilution of perspective and clarity of brand identity and customer base. But I think that is more in response to needing to answer to shareholders or wanting to appeal to a wider audience. And it's not necessarily in the best interest of the brand strategy. And what instantly comes to mind when I think about that is, are you familiar with the brand Allbirds?
Yes, I am.
So for those who aren't, Allbirds is, they started off as a tennis shoe company. I think they now sell clothing as well.
Yes.
But the thing that really made them unique was all of the sourcing of their materials. They were using sustainable wool and this innovative rubber alternative. And so they were both a highly sustainable brand and really comfortable. And as they've grown, as they've tried to appeal to a wider audience and go more mainstream, in a lot of ways, they've kind of abandoned the things that made them special and unique. Now they're still comfortable, but this cornerstone of being a little bit anti consumerism and very proudly sustainable brand is no
Mhm.
longer a central part of their message. Now they're just kind of selling shoes, and they really haven't been doing well financially for a year or two.
Wow.
And I think that a big piece of that is losing sight of that thing that allowed them to be successful in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, and I think it's a mistake that a lot of brands make. And it's, it's tough because we talked earlier about a brand, and I asked you if you had an e-commerce brand, and then I'm kind of in the same camp that it takes a lot to run them. But I think you bring up Allbirds, it really just highlights the importance of having a tailored strategy and kind of sticking with that strategy and not just following along with maybe what some of the other competitors are doing and what's going on in your space, because you see that all the time where a brand will start, like in the Allbirds case, they'll start with their shoes, that's their niche. And that's kind of how I knew. Actually, I don't even think I knew that they sold clothing. I mean, I had heard about them years ago, and there was kind of a big thing. Everybody was talking about these Allbirds shoes, and I didn't really realize they went into um, the clothing space as well. So, I mean, I get where brands are going, because as things slow down a bit, they got to think of ways in which to increase their revenue. And so, naturally, of course, if you're selling shoes, clothing can kind of course, tie into that. So it makes sense, but you do have to really understand your core customer and figure out, all right, is this going to make sense for us? Are people going to buy clothes from us just because they've bought our shoes? So it's, yeah, very, very important that you really take the time to decide before you get into these different areas.
Yes, and I don't necessarily think that they went wrong with adding clothing to their line. I think actually their big mistake was losing sight of what their unique perspective, commitment to a certain set of values and
Mm.
target customer was. And by trying to broaden their reach, they just end up really not having a perspective at all. And that's
Okay.
where it's a problem, because ultimately sales is about giving people enough reason to choose you, but
Mm.
also to not choose all of the other alternatives.
Mhm.
So it's not enough to simply get them excited about you. You need to empower them and connect with them in a way that makes them want to do business with you rather than all of the other companies that they could buy from. And
All
so
right.
if you're not giving them enough reason for that, then you're not going to be able to go the distance and really build a brand that has a strong, profitable future.
Yes, very, very true. And a lot of it goes to customer research, which is kind of what I wanted to go into now. Before a brand makes these kind of big decisions of going into a whole different product line, because this happens all the time. I'm constantly seeing brands that are launching different lines or in one area, and then you see slowly and slowly their product line expands and expands. So I wanted to see what are some key elements of effective customer research, and how should a business leverage these, to leverage these insights in order to build a really strong brand identity without becoming too scattered.
Right. Yeah. So there's a few different elements of that, and they're also going to sort of evolve as your company evolves and as your customer evolves, keeping in mind that if you're starting a new business, you don't have a customer base yet. And so you're also going to need to do research to figure out who you think your customer base is going to be. So there's a few areas that you can go to, whether you're launching a business or whether you're established and really just wanting to get a firmer hold and grasp on who your customers are. And so one of those is you can actually look at your competitors and see who their customers are. And especially, are there customer groups that maybe are not being well served by that competitor that you feel like you could do a better job of serving. So looking at things like your competitors' reviews. Of course, if you're already running a business and you have access to your own reviews, those are great insights to really dig into and identify what are people saying they love about your product, they hate about your product, how they're talking about using it, even the kind of language that they're using. That's all going to start to give insights to you about who these people are, what they care about, how they're integrating your product into their lives. Then, of course, social media is one of the most amazing tools around for getting clarity about who your customers are, because this isn't just a written review. This is oftentimes people recording themselves talking about an item or a category if they're not speaking specifically about your product. And so now you have a whole new dimension of, you're not just looking at some 2D words, you're looking at a 3-dimensional human. And so you can start to fill in some of those pieces as well. Because one of the things that I see companies of all sizes making a big mistake is really being very sparse with identifying who their customers are. So when you say, who is your target customer? And the response is, well, anybody between the ages of 18 to 99 that might need this widget, is not a very helpful profile of a customer. And so by going to some of these places and then even integrating AI into this process, so that using AI to be able to distill out the commonalities and the patterns and any of those details that would be difficult to parse out as a human reviewing all of those things manually, but to ask an AI chatbot to review these 100 reviews and tell you what the biggest takeaways are, the most common pros and cons, and some of the standout experiences, and even building a profile around who the customer avatar might be that's leaving a review like this, can really be a way to expedite some of this. And then maybe even free up some of your time to invest a bit more into doing your customer research and your competitor research on social media. And so understanding where your customers also spend their time is really important, because what you're selling, maybe your customers are on Facebook more, or maybe they are on TikTok. TikTok is kind of the social media darling right now, but not all customers spend their time on TikTok. Maybe your customers are on Twitch or in Reddit threads. And so being clear about also where your customers are spending their time is a really integral part of making sure that you're putting your effort into the right place.
Yes, for sure. So it really seems like there's a lot that goes into this, as far as elements that comprise that customer research, from, like you said, going down as granularly as analyzing the reviews and the wording people are using. Because I think, like you said, there's consistent things that you're going to pick out just on how people say things about your product. So that, and then of course there's more formalized things that you can do. Surveying past customers and getting direct opinions from them about things, and all of these things, I think you need to kind of have some serious brainstorming sessions with your team, and then figure out what direction that you want to go. And lastly, before we actually close things out, Emma, before we wrap things up, kind of keeping things in the same vein of brand identity and building customer research, where do you see everything heading in the next 5 years or so, specifically in these high competition markets? Are there things that you're seeing that a brand can do to stand out, even though there's more and more competition coming?
That's a great question. And I mean, first of all, things are changing so rapidly that 5 years is a long time. And there are probably technologies that I won't have even been able to think of that have already become just a part of our day to day by that point. But I think some of the trends that we're seeing and some of the things that we really need to be paying attention to is, first of all, the way that the social selling, and it's not just influencers that are uh, affiliating for and recommending and selling products, but it's really everyday people on these different platforms. And not only is that sort of democratizing how that world looks, it also creates a more direct line between the consumer and the brand. And I think the brands that are really going to be successful, as you're right, it is increasingly more difficult to get eyeballs, to hold attention. We're in a very trend infatuated world where it's always looking for the next thing. And so what do you do to not just grab that attention, but then make sure to hold on to it and continue to have a sustainable business? Even if you have the bump of virality, can you maintain that into the future? And so that's where my belief is that having a really clear brand identity and a strong sense of who your customers are is even more important, and investing in creating those relationships of people that are loyal to you, that are excited by what you're doing, and that are wanting to pay attention to you is so important. And so thinking about what you can do to really make people want to be associated with and connected to you. And I would say that one brand in particular that is, I think, doing a great job of this, I'll actually name two. So one is Liquid Death, which
Mhm.
their marketing is really out there. They are not for
Yes.
everyone. I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of people are very angry about
Yes.
the marketing campaigns that they run.
Right.
And then also, I think Elf Cosmetics is doing a great job of them. And both of these, they are very clear on who their customers are. They're very clear on the set of values that they have. They have a really strong sense of where they're going and finding opportunities to connect with and delight their customers in an ongoing and meaningful way
Mhm.
is really what I see as the path forward for long-term sustained growth.
Okay, great. Those are some great, fascinating predictions. And yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Liquid Death because of my previous podcast, we actually did like a little mini case study on them, and it was interesting. And they're not for everyone, and the positioning that they've taken is a little extreme, but it works. And I mean, their valuation is unbelievable. So they're doing something right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
And they're selling water. And,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. It's just
I,
water.
I think the takeaway with them is not to say, okay, well, we just have to make a lot of people angry.
Mhm.
You can be inspired by what they're doing and still apply some of those concepts in a way that is organic and natural and aligned with your identity, even if that identity is very gentle and delicate, or very conservative and wholesome.
Mhm.
You It's really about being clear about what makes you unique, and
Right.
rather than feeling like you have to hide that away to try to appeal to more people, that's where you go wrong. And instead, if you can
Yes.
figure out how to really embrace that and lean into that,
Hmm.
then that's where people are going to be excited and seek you out and tell
Yes.
their friends about you and create content about your brand online and
Mhm.
all of those things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you have to kind of figure out who you are and then kind of go with it. And that brand Liquid Death definitely definitely did that, and they've ran with it. Well, Emma, this has been an awesome conversation. I know we didn't get a chance to kind of dive into the Amazon world. I definitely like to have you back on the podcast at another time, because I think we should probably just dedicate a full show about Amazon and kind of maintaining your brand identity within the Amazon ecosystem, optimizing product pages and all that thing. Because I think there's a lot to get into with regards to that, because a lot of D2C brands also have a presence on Amazon. So I think that would be a great conversation to have at a later date. But this has been awesome. We definitely appreciate having you on. But before we do wrap things up, I always like to shift gears just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think we'd be interested to know.
Sure. I feel like this is like those icebreakers that you do in school, and my mind goes blank. I guess an interesting fact about me is that I've lived on 4 continents. So
Wow.
I'm currently in Las Vegas, but I've lived in a variety of countries and definitely have a big appetite for new cultures and new places and new foods.
Okay, that's awesome. 4 continents. Okay, well you've got me beat by several. I think I've only lived on one continent, so very exciting. Good stuff. Good stuff. I know you have some stories to tell about where you've lived in the past, so we'll have to dive into that maybe in the fun fact for the next episode.
Absolutely.
Your most interesting continent. But that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Before we do let you go, if our listeners and viewers like to reach out to you and pick your brain any more about building a unique brand identity or anything under that sun, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Our website, marketingbyemma.com, is a centralized place where you'll be able to find email, contact form, phone number, WhatsApp, whatever your preferred medium of communication. You can probably reach us there. And then also, if you would just like to learn more about some of these things that we've been talking about, I do have a YouTube channel where I go in depth into a lot of these topics, and it's just marketingbyemma.com or .com, Marketing by Emma on YouTube.
Gotcha. That's great. Yeah, and I was mentioning to you, I caught one of your videos that I'm going to dive back into because the title and the thumbnail definitely caught me. So I'm going to definitely go back and see what you have to say. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to check you out on YouTube as well. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll also have, of course, those links in the show notes as well, so people can reach you on YouTube and go to your website as well. And this has been an awesome conversation, Emma. We really appreciate having you on the e-commerce marketing podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce marketing podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.